Now, where does Bitcoin play into all this? Because I think, at least I'm speaking for myself, I was extremely disappointed with the 2020, 2021 bull market. I think everyone was expecting 100K. I think we should have hit 100K. I think that there was a multitude of factors, whether it was the China ban, which made the hash rate drop, which caused the sell pressure from the miners. There was the rehypothecation from FTX. And then the theme that I hear this cycle is the diminishing returns theory, right? Which is essentially the best days of Bitcoin are over. We'll be lucky if we hit 100K this cycle. What is your take on that, Tone Vays?
Yeah, I was certainly disappointed in that second half of 2021. And only because we broke the prior all-time high from April. For me as a technical analyst, the most bullish sign for me is breaking the prior all-time high. When we broke 65,000 and went to 68, I was incredibly bullish, mostly from a TA perspective. So yeah, it was disappointing we never got to that $80,000-$90,000 range. And I think on the next one, we can overshoot. Now, diminishing returns is true, but even if the price of Bitcoin goes to $250,000, you can still claim it's a diminishing return based on how it did in 2013 and how it did in 2017. Even going to $250,000 would be a diminishing return. So that would be a nice run up for Bitcoin. Look, it is true because there's a lot more value on chain. But at the same time, we have not seen any critical mass adoption on the country level. All we have is El Salvador. And on the corporate level, all we really have is MicroStrategies. We really have one company and one country. And I think these things are coming. I think more countries are going to adopt it. I think more companies are just going to put their money into Bitcoin on their balance sheets. And once that sets in, like the ETF is an ETF. The ETF, I don't even think is going to be the main catalyst here. There's other great catalysts, and even like regular people, regular plebs, if you're middle class income in the West, you should be able to have one Bitcoin in cold storage. It's $37,000 right now. Would have been better a year ago when it was $15,000. Anybody could have. I mean, if you have a $70,000, $80,000 job, you should be able to hold one Bitcoin for the future. And we now have over 1 million wallets with one Bitcoin. And if your wallet has one Bitcoin today, you can afford a second Bitcoin. And so I am expecting 2 million wallets to hold a Bitcoin, at least a Bitcoin. And this is the kind of Bitcoin that gets off chain for a long time. Also, Lightning Network. As more and more, as a few million Bitcoin gets into the Lightning Network, all of this removes liquidity. It removes sell pressure on Bitcoin. And when that FOMO sets in, I can easily see Bitcoin going up from, say, 75,000 straight to 150,000 in a matter of a few months. Very, very easily happens because the liquidity is just not going to be there. The sell pressure is not going to be there, and it will just fly up. And I think that day is coming this cycle.
Man, and that is and I agree, by the way. I can't explain it and articulate it and say it the way that you did, Tone, but I do believe that this cycle is different because of Michael Saylor, because of Nayib Bukele, and their strategies are going to be vindicated, and there's no amount of corporate media propaganda spin that's going to be able to deny the fact that they made the right moves. I mean, Michael Saylor is, and again, not every company is going to go, as balls to the wall as Saylor has with MicroStrategy. But even if a company puts on 1%, 2%, 3% of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, it's going to completely outperform any other strategy. And I think that's going to be undeniable this next cycle. Do you see a FOMO from a bunch of institutions, a bunch of public companies trying to buy Bitcoin as the price is running up? Or do you think they'll wait for the next cycle?
No, I don't think anyone's waiting for another cycle. I think everyone is just waiting for the break of the all-time high. And I think that FOMO sets in above 50,000. One more halving, I think if Bitcoin does not cross 50,000 before the halving, and it crosses 50,000 after the halving, that cross of 50,000 is just going to create massive FOMO. I can see us going from 50 to quarter mil in 6 months.
That is insane. And are we talking about the regular pattern of, you know, where it's usually about 9 months to 12 months after the halving? So really the beginning of 2025, mid 2025, are we seeing this run up? Or do you start to see this happen before? According to Adam Back, you know, he made a bet on Twitter with the Bikingo, a buddy of ours, where he was betting him that we would hit 100K before the next halving. Do you believe in that? Are you on that camp or what?
No, I don't think we're going to hit 100K. I don't even think we're going to hit 50K before the halving. I think we're just going to get stuck here and struggle quite a bit. It's been a very frustrating bear market, but you know what? Everything is playing out exactly like the prior cycles, and it's kind of scary. So I am actually fully on board that this cycle is going to look very similar to the prior cycles. But after that, things are going to change. I don't know how they're going to change, but maybe we're not going to have an 80% crash again. I don't know. But I think the next cycle is going to look very, very different. But the current cycle, I think, is completely on par. I think that maybe 43,000 is the peak before the halving. We're gonna, pull back down to maybe 30,000 at some point before the halving, and then after the halving, within maybe 3 months after the halving, we're gonna break 50,000, and the break of 50,000 just sets everything off for FOMO. So you really want to be in Bitcoin before it hits 50,000, because after that, you're gonna go to sleep, wake up, and you can go, what the hell happened? That's a $10,000 candle.
Yeah. But you mentioned something there, which is you do believe that we will pull back down to 30K before the halving.
I do. I think this recent run up is a little bit weird. This whole run up feels like, first of all, it got kicked off on fake news by Cointelegraph about the Bitcoin ETF being approved. And in the last couple of hours, Bitcoin rallied again. The announcement is coming this Friday from Gary Gensler. I think it's going to be negative. I think the market is going to, nosedive a bit when Gary Gensler does not approve the ETF this Friday. And then people are going to hold out into January, waiting for him to approve the ETF in January. And then once again, they'll be disappointed. And then we'll see, right? We are getting closer and closer to the halving. And miners are actually kind of incentivized. The big miners are incentivized to create a lot of pain for their less efficient competition. So after the halving, the big miners that want to dominate the market, they're very incentivized to dump Bitcoin on the market to really crush the miners that are struggling. There'll be miners that are struggling after the halving, and they're going to go like, if we can hold out these 2 to 3 months after the halving, now we're making half the profit. Maybe we can hang in there. Maybe the price will rise. If these big miners are going to try to crush them by just selling Bitcoin into the halving because they know they have the money to hold out, and then once those miners capitulate after the halving, then we'll be on the upside.
It's going up forever. You're against Bitcoin, you're against freedom.